Hello guys, welcome back to another Janko lesson. Today we're going to be talking about, we're back on the Python track today, and we will be continuing with our next lesson, which is functions. Now in the previous video, we talked about loops and how each of the loops are different with the for loop and the while loop. So now we're going to go into the functions and we're going to see how we could create functions and pass in parameters into our function. So it won't make sense now, but hopefully at the end of this lecture, you will understand the general knowledge of what it is. So let's go on with the presentation. So the first question is, what are functions? So functions are something in programming that takes an input, takes in an argument or an input, and this argument is known as a parameter, right? It also computes new values like strings or numbers, and at the end of the function, we always return a value to whatever we want, to whatever we assign the variable to the output. In Python, functions usually begin with the word def. So def is usually how we define a function. So if you want to name a function, there's an example right here. Sorry. There's an example right here. It says def hello. Hello is the name of the function, but in front of that name of the function, we have to use the word def. So def means define that function. So we're going to define the function as hello, and in the parentheses is where we pass in the argument or the parameter. In this case, we pass in the parameter would, and that will be our parameter. But I'll show you a good example in the next slide, in the next couple slides, where it will actually give you a good detail how functions actually work and how they return the value at the end of a program. So here are some of the lists of the built-in functions Python has. So these are the built-in functions. So you could use this. These are the functions you cannot use because they are taken as key built-in functions. So if they're you cannot call any of your functions, whatever's in this list, because they're already built in. It's a keyword. So again, like in programming, we cannot use keywords as variables or to define something. So right now, there's a couple ones that are really that stand out in this list. So we have a lot of them, like string. So this str function actually converts a number back into a string. Same thing with the int. It converts the string into an integer. And then we have the float. Again, we in the previous video, we explained what the difference between integer and floats are. So again, if you don't understand that, please just go back to that video and try to comprehend that. So here's an example of a simple function we're going to use in Python to calculate an area of a circle, right? So again, we need to know to calculate an area of a circle, we need to know the formula. So the formula for calculating the area of a circle is pi radius squared, right? But in programming, we have to do it in a certain format. So in Python, the first thing we always have to do is import, right? So we're going to import the math module, or the math library, so we can use all the math functions in here. And when we import math, we could include math.py. So pi is going to be known as 3.14. Just in a simple math class, we learned what pi is. So you could use the math function, type in math.py to call the pi, and it will actually give out this full info. If you don't want to use the math.py, you can always use 3.14. It's up to you, but this will be the more accurate way. You'll get a more accurate result if you use the pi method. Right here, we have defined circle area, right? So this is again, remember, every time in Python, we start with the word def, which is the name of how we start functions. So we call it def, and then the name of our functions, we're gonna call this circle underscore area, right? So this is the name of the function. And in the parentheses, it's the parameter, right? The parameter is known as, we're passing in the radius, as in this case. And now we just simply type in area. That's going to be a variable. It's assigned to. And then we're going to assign it to, now we're going to calculate the area. So again, area of a circle is pi radius squared. So in programming, we'll type in math.py times radius, and we're going to square it. And you can use the you could use the caret stick and use the 2, or you could use the double store 2, and it'll be the same thing. And at the end, you'll get whatever you pass in as a radius. So let's say we pass in 5. This will calculate the area when the radius of the circle is 5. So you could change the number because radius is always going to be assigned to a specific number we're going to assign it to. So whether it's 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever you pass in here, it's going to calculate down here. And it will just be at the end, we just want to return that value. So at the end, it will just return the area, so it will return the area of the circle at the end. So what does Python do as we type? So how does this actually work? Now, this is where we're going to see the functionality of it and how functions actually compute each line by line as we write this code. So first, how Python reads this as it first reads the keyword def. So once it sees the keyword def, it knows it's going to be a function we're dealing with, right? And then it'll read the rest of the function definition. It'll read the whole and check its syntax, right, for any errors or miscalculations. And at the end of the function, at the end of the definition, when at the end of the function, the blank line is reached, and the function is called, and it will actually return an output. Now, remember, in any function, we always have to return a function. Once we return the function, that function gets terminated. So if we do not have a return anything at the end, the function is always going to return. If there's no value to be returned, it's going to return none. Functions always have to return something. So if nothing's getting returned at the end, it's just going to return the word none. Just so you know, if you ever want to return a value, remember, ever want to return a value, it's always going to return none because functions must return something. So that would be that's just a key point to keep in mind. So next thing we're going to be doing is passing arguments to a function. Now, like I said, an argument is going to be a piece of data that is set into a function. It's the thing inside the parentheses followed by the function name. And again, what we're calling this stuff is the parameter. And that'll be on the next slide. We'll get into a full definition of what parameters are. Functions can be used as arguments in calculations. And when calling the function, the argument is placed in the parentheses following the function name. So again, like I said, def hello. Hello is the function name. And then we pass in the argument, which is would in the parentheses. Anything inside the parentheses is known as the argument or the parameter. So parameters, what is a parameter, right? A parameter is a variable that's assigned to the value of an argument when the function is called, right? And the parameter and the argument reference the same value. So they're the same thing. Argument or parameter is the same inside the parentheses. And this is a general format, right? Def, function name, whatever you want to call your function, and the parameter inside in the parentheses. And the scope of a parameter, the function in which the parameter is used. Okay, so we talked about the functions and what they're supposed to do. And now we're going to talk about the return statement. And like I said in the previous slides, I explained a little bit about the return statement, but this gives you a full-blown detail what the return statement actually does in Python or any other programming language. So what is a return statement in Python? So a return statement is used to end the execution of the function called the return. We call that keyword return, and it will result, which is the result. And the value of the expression following the return keyword is to be called. So return, like I said, any function type has to be always returned to a return value. So if there is no return at the end, it will actually return a default, which is none. So like right here, it says if it's the return statement is without any expression, the special value none is returned. So when you run the Python program and the function doesn't see a return, it doesn't return any value, it will actually just return none because a function must return something at the end. And if it doesn't have anything to return, it will just return the value none. And again, functions always end. Once it sees the return statement, that's the end of the function. It won't execute anything underneath that specific line, especially in Python when we known as an indentation language. So it depends on where you have the return statement, it will end the function. Once it hits that first return statement, that function officially gets terminated. And here's a few key takeaways from today's lesson, right? So functions take one or more parameter and return the appropriate value expression at the end of the execution. It starts with the keyword def, right? So anytime in Python anytime we want to start a function, we use the keyword def. Cannot use the keyword when naming a function in Python, right? So you cannot use a keyword that's already built into the function as your name of that function. So like in the previous slide where the built-in functions were, you cannot use any of those names for your function. Now, if you use something that's different, like capital letters of that word, like float, if you wanted to call def float, and float is already a built-in function in Python. But if you capitalize that F, then that would be fine because Python is case sensitive. So a capital F is not the same thing as a lowercase f. Parameters are basically arguments that are in the parentheses following the function name, and a function have little to as no parameters to infinite numbers of parameters passed as an argument. So what I mean by that is when you pass in the parentheses, when you have a couple of key words or arguments, you could have more than one parameter. So you could have infinite number of parameters in that parentheses, and it'll be fine. You could have no parameters either. So functions don't have to always take parameters. It could have no parameters as well. So just to keep in mind, you can have no parameters, you got one parameter, or you can have multiple infinite parameters inside that function. And again, the return statement is executed at the end of the function. Any statement after the return statement will not be executed. Once the function hits the return statement, it officially terminates the function, and the output will be returned, whether it's a value, a string, an integer, or again, by default, none, if nothing's getting returned. So that will be the end of this presentation right now. But if you have any questions, comments, concerns, just don't feel free to hesitate us to email us at gencode.us@gmail.com for any more depth into this. And if you really missed something, always have this lecture will be posted soon, so you'll be able to go rewatch this video and understand the key steps, key concept of this Gencode Python track. Also, there will be a lot of this slide will be there. So anytime you're stuck on something, just pause the video, just read through the slides a little bit, try to get a good understanding of what each of the materials is trying to say, and you should be fine. But we're done with the presentation at this point. But I just want to show you something as a example in PyCharm. So let's go PyCharm. I'm going to give you a little one good example of how a function will execute. So let me open up PyCharm, and you can follow along if you guys are stuck. You can follow along with me and to get a better understanding. So just go PyCharm, and we'll look through how a actual function works, and we'll type in a simple function right now to just give a good understanding. So again, this will be posted on Gencode's website, and it'll also be posted into the YouTube channel. So if you really just to keep rewatching and trying to understand, plus you could watch my previous videos of how some of this stuff works. So let me just create a new file here. I'll create a new Python file, and I'll name it functions. Okay, so let's write a simple function right here. Let's show you the area of the circle thing again. And actually, let's do something different. Let's calculate the area of the triangle. So we're gonna hit def area, and then we're gonna do area of a triangle. So area, we'll name it area underscore triangle. And this could be anything. You can name it anything. You can name it triangle, or you could just name it area. It doesn't matter. And we're just gonna pass in a parameter. So what does so before we even know what to type in, what is the formula for an area of a triangle? The area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. So you're going to be passing in two parameters in this case, and that will be the base and the height. So those are two parameters. I'm going to call it base and height. Colon must always have the colon when we define function at the end of your, after you define your parameters. Now let's just calculate the area. So let's just call it area equal to, and now we want to call it 1/2 base times height. So there's two ways you could write 1/2. You could do it 1/2 in the parentheses, or you could do 0.5. Would be this. You'll still get the same result at the end. So I'm going to use I'm just going to use 0.5, the decimal format, but you could use the fraction 1/2. And we're going to multiply. So 0.5, which is 1/2, the base, and times the height, right? And that will be it. And then you want to just hit the return the area. And then we're going to print it to the line. So we want to print area triangle, and let's just call it 5,3. Let's run it. And right now we return none because I got rid of the return value. So like I said, if you don't have anything returned, it will automatically return none. But if I were to type in a return value, so let's say return, we want to return the area. Let's run it again. And it's not moving. Oh, the indentation. Let's run it again. And you got 7.5. So what it's basically doing is it's going to be multiplying 5 times 3, which is 15, and you divide that by half, and you'll get 7.5. Right? So remember, indentation, I made a mistake here. I put the return value outside, which is going to always return an error. So you make sure you always indent it. Again, Python's really case sensitive with indentation. So make sure everything's indented. And like I said, if you get rid of this return like I did before, and I rerun this, it'll return none because there's no value getting returned. The function must always return something. So if there's no value being returned, it's just going to return none. So this is a pretty much a basic understanding of how functions work. This is a simple function, but it could get more complex than this. I just wanted to give you a good preview of how it would work. So let's just run through it and see what I did here. So I called a function, right? Again, anytime in Python, we start with the word def, right? To call a function. So we type in def. I named the function. I named it area of a triangle, but this could be named anything, and it doesn't really matter what the name is, as long as it's not a built-in function already. You can name it anything you want. And then I use the parentheses, and I had to figure out what, in this particular case, we're finding area of a triangle. So you need to know the formula for area of a triangle. Area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. So I know I need to pass two parameters. I need to pass the base, and I need to pass the height. So that's why I passed in base and the height. Colon, always have the double colons. And then I named the then I did my formula, right? So I called it area, and it's equal to, and then I did the area of a triangle. So again, you can use 1/2 or 0.5. So I use 0.5 times base times height. And now, and then let me just add the return statement back in here. And then at the end, I return the area, right? So I'm returning this. So whatever's going to get calculated is going to return that output. So I hit print, right? Area of a triangle. I call that function. I'm going to call the area of a triangle function. So I call it down here, and I pass in the two parameters. So the base, which is 5, and the height, which is 3, right? So base is equal to height. So now it's going to calculate it, right? When I run this, it's going to calculate. Python's going to calculate at 0.5 times 5 times 3, and it'll give me the output of 7 and 0.5 right there. So that's basically what it's doing. It's basically calling each of these parameters, calling this function at the end. I'm calling the function back. Area of the triangle, I'm calling that function, and I pass in the two parameters. If I pass in two parameters, I must have two parameters down here. And this is pretty straightforward. The base is 5, the height is 3. I could change this too. I could change this to 2 and 3, and then run it, and it'll give me a different, it'll calculate it again. And this time it gave me 3, because it's basically saying 2 times 3, which is 6, and then multiply that by half, which is 3. And that's why I got that. So I hope you found this Python track lesson helpful. I'll have this post. This will be posted on Genco, like I said before, and it will also be posted on the YouTube channel. So if you have any questions, feel free to email us at genco.us@gmail.com. And I'm going to be signing off, and I hope to see you in the next lesson. So have a wonderful day and stay safe.